They walked into that meeting with my work. They just didn't know I'd removed the one piece that made it actually work. My name is Derek Santos. I'm 39 years old, and I've been building enterprise tech systems for 16 years. I thought I'd seen every kind of corporate backstabbing. I was wrong. 3 months ago, I spent 4 months building the perfect pitch. Monologics, a massive logistics company with systems so outdated they were burning money like a bonfire. I found the leak. I designed the fix. 58 slides, every stat verified, every visual polished, every line of code tested. It was my masterpiece until Brandon walked in. It was a Thursday morning. I was in the war room, putting final touches on the presentation when Brandon Sullivan strolled in, VP of Client Relations, expensive suit, hair gelled like he was auditioning for a cologne commercial. He didn't even look at me, just reached over, grabbed my laptop, and slid it toward himself. "We'll take it from here," he said with this smug little smile. "You're not quite senior enough for a client like this." I froze, fingers still hovering over the keyboard. "Excuse me." He turned to Kevin, his golden boy, the guy who thought APIs stood for a pretty idea, and handed him my laptop like passing a relay baton. "We've got this covered," Brandon said. And then they walked out, with my work, my initials, DS, still stamped in the footer of every single slide. I sat there, stunned, watching them disappear down the hallway with 4 months of my life, like it was just another Tuesday. That's when I realized something. This company didn't care about who did the work. They cared about who looked good presenting it. But here's what they didn't know. I'd already pulled out the heart of the solution, the critical piece, the one thing that made everything else actually function, and only I knew how to explain it. Let me back up. 2 years ago, I joined Velocity Systems thinking I'd finally made it. Senior infrastructure engineer. Good salary. Real projects. But it wasn't long before I realized this place ran on politics, not performance. Didn't matter if you could code blindfolded or optimize a data pipeline in your sleep. What mattered was whether you played golf with Brandon on Fridays or laughed at the right jokes during happy hour. Brandon was the worst. Designer suits, overpriced cologne, zero technical knowledge. The kind of guy who could sell an empty box with enough buzzwords, then leave you to actually fill it after the contract was signed. Then came Monologics. $8.2 million projected revenue. The whale. Everyone knew it. Whoever landed Monologics wasn't just getting a bonus. They were getting promoted. Brandon started strutting around like he'd already won. Kevin, his hand-picked sidekick, started lurking around pitch meetings like a vulture. But they didn't find the problem. I did. Buried deep in Monologics' system logs was a recurring data loop, overlooked, inefficient, and costing them $3.1 million annually in wasted processing power. Their whole system was bloated, slow, and expensive. Nobody had caught it. Not Monologics. Not Brandon. Not even Diana, my director. I stayed late for 3 weeks reconstructing their traffic patterns. Built a new model. Designed an auto-balancing system that would save them millions. When I showed Diana the results, her eyes lit up. "Derek, this is brilliant. This could be the win we've been waiting for." I actually believed her. She said, "Let me loop Brandon in. We'll need him to package this for the executives." That should have been my first warning. The next week, everything changed. I stopped getting meeting invites. Brandon and Kevin started holding closed-door strategy sessions. When I walked past, their laptops were open to MY slides. My models. My architecture. I went to Diana. "Hey, I've been pulled from the prep meetings. What's going on?" She gave me that soft HR smile. "Brandon wants to control the messaging. Don't worry, you're the backbone of this project." Backbone. That's what they call you when they want you to carry something heavy and invisible. That night, I stayed late and did something I'd never done before. I created a duplicate version of the Monologics proposal. Everything looked identical. Same visuals, same conclusions, same impressive numbers. Except one thing. I pulled out the core, the auto-balancing buffer system, the exact function that made the entire optimization actually work. If they wanted to present my work without me, they'd have to explain it without me too. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was insurance. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. Monologics was sending their entire executive team, including Sarah Chun, their chief technology officer. I was told to stand by in case you're needed. Translation: sit down, shut up, and stay invisible. So I parked myself at my desk with lukewarm coffee and a spreadsheet I wasn't reading, just waiting. At 10:06, the elevator doors opened. 5 executives in sharp suits walked onto our floor. Sarah Chun led the group, mid-40s, sharp eyes, the kind of person who didn't waste time on bullshit. Brandon met them in the lobby, all smiles and handshakes. Kevin followed with MY presentation tucked under his arm like it was his baby. Diana brought up the rear, smiling like everything was fine. I watched through the glass walls of conference room. 30 minutes in, I saw it happen. Sarah leaned forward, tapping something specific on the page. Her expression shifted, not annoyed, confused. She tilted her head, narrowed her eyes. Kevin started gesturing wildly with his hands. Always a bad sign. You can tell someone doesn't know what they're talking about when they start waving buzzwords around like a magic wand. Sarah flipped back a page, pointed again, said something. Brandon stepped in, probably trying to charm his way through it. Sarah sat up straighter, raised one eyebrow, crossed her arms. Then, like synchronized swimmers, all 5 Monologics executives turned their heads and looked directly at me. My phone buzzed. Diana, come in. Now. I stood slowly, straightened my shirt, took one last sip of coffee, and walked toward the conference room like a man walking to his own trial. I opened the door. Silence. Brandon looked like he'd swallowed glass. Kevin's eyes darted everywhere except at me. Diana's smile was trembling. Miss Chun, Diana began, "This is Derek Santos." He worked on some of the back-end analysis. Some of back-end. Sarah didn't look at Diana. She looked at me. "You wrote this proposal?" "Yes." "From scratch?" "Yes." She nodded, then turned the binder to a page near the back. "There's a function missing," she said plainly. "Auto-balancing buffer control. Your model references it, but the logic never appears." "Why?" I didn't answer right away. I walked over and sat down, not in the back corner, right in the middle, right where Brandon should have put me from the start. Then I said, calm and clear, "Because it's not in the deck." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because it can't be explained on a slide. You'd need simulation models, real-time examples, behavioral mapping. I didn't include it because nobody but me could walk you through it correctly." Diana shifted uncomfortably. Brandon stiffened. Sarah didn't move. "Go on," she said. So I did. I explained the missing buffer logic, how Monologics' overflow cascade was bottlenecking their entire memory system, how my solution introduced a 9-layer loop system that auto-throttled based on real-time transaction behavior. I explained the cost savings, not just in processing, but in server load reduction, maintenance hours, failover risk. As I talked, her team started firing questions, one after another, and I answered every single one. Brandon didn't speak again. Kevin looked like a kid who forgot his lines in the school play. Diana nodded occasionally, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew the show was over. Finally, Sarah sat back and tapped her pen on the table. "Why wasn't he in the room from the start?" she asked, looking straight at Brandon. Brandon cleared his throat. "We thought senior leadership optics would present best to your team." She tilted her head. "I'm only interested in who understands the system." Then she turned to me. "Mr. Santos, if we move forward with the solution, would you be leading implementation?" Brandon jumped in. "Of course," Derek was support. "No," Sarah interrupted. "I'm asking him." I looked right at her. "Yes, if I'm in, I lead. Otherwise, I can't guarantee it's done right." She glanced at her team. They nodded. "Then that's our requirement," she said. "If Velocity wants this deal, he runs it. Directly." Silence. Brandon's face went white. Diana looked like she was calculating whether to panic now or later. I sat back, didn't smile, didn't gloat, just let the moment settle. 3 hours later, I was called into a meeting with Richard Hayes, Our CEO, Brandon and Diana, were already there. So was HR. Brandon didn't wait. He sabotaged a meeting, he said sharply. He intentionally withheld critical information and put this company at risk. Richard looked at me. Is that true? What's true, I said, setting a thick folder on his desk, is that I wasn't allowed in the room to explain the work I built. I was told I wasn't senior enough, that optics mattered. I tapped the folder. That's the full record. Emails, timestamps, version logs. Everything. Richard opened it slowly, flipped through the first few pages in silence. After a minute, he asked, why wasn't the algorithm the slides? Because if I'd included it, I said, I would have been erased completely. They already cut me from the meeting. If the solution had been fully in the deck, Monologics would have been left with a sales team bluffing through my work. Brandon scoffed. This is petty. You mean like taking credit for a system you couldn't explain when the CTO asked one question? Richard raised a hand. Silence. Then HR slid an email across his desk. This came in an hour ago, she said. From Sarah Chun. It's addressed to you, Richard. She glanced at me. Monologics says the deal only stands if Derek Santos leads implementation. No one else. Brandon went pale. Richard leaned back and studied me for a long moment. Then he turned to Brandon and Diana. Leave the room. What? Brandon blinked. You're siding with... I said leave. They both stood. Diana looked at her feet. Brandon stared daggers at me as he walked out. The door clicked shut. Richard leaned forward. That was bold, he said. Dangerous. I know. You know what else is dangerous? A VP bluffing through a pitch to an $8 million client. I didn't respond. He glanced at the email again. They want you specifically. That gives you leverage. So, tell me, what do you want? I didn't hesitate. I want to lead implementation. I want to report directly to you. And when I deliver, we talk promotion. He nodded once. And the algorithm? You'll have full documentation by morning. Richard picked up his pen. Good, because I don't want to be blindsided like that again. You won't be, I said. You're paying attention now. The next morning, I sent Richard the full technical documentation at 8:03 a.m. At 8:19, he replied, received, solid work. Let's talk rollout Monday. But the bigger shift came that afternoon. Sarah Chin requested a direct call. Just me and her. Mr. Santos, she said when I joined, you did more than sell us a solution. You showed us why we needed one. Glad it came through. Which brings me to why I called. We're moving forward, but under 3 conditions. I raised an eyebrow. Conditions? 1. You're contractually named as the implementation lead. In writing. Understood. 2. I want quarterly technical check-ins. With you, not a team. Fine by me. And 3. She paused. We want a clause. If Velocity underdelivers or removes you, we reserve the right to hire you directly. That hit like a quiet bomb. That's unusual, I said carefully. So is finding someone who actually solves problems, she replied. We've burned through 4 vendors in 2 years. I'm not doing it again. I brought the clause straight to Richard. His eyes widened. She wants to poach you. She wants leverage. I said, I'm giving you the heads up, not an ultimatum. 2 hours later, legal drafted a counteroffer. By end of day, it was signed. The new terms: I'd lead the Monologics rollout, report directly to Richard, get promoted to systems director, and receive a percentage of the contract tied to performance milestones. Within a week, 2 more companies reached out asking for my team specifically. Brandon, reassigned to some vague advisory role. No authority, no team. Last I heard, he was working remotely from Arizona. Diana kept her job, but she stopped getting invited to strategy meetings. Meanwhile, I built my team. 9 engineers. Handpicked, smart, overlooked, hungry. We weren't just delivering for Monologics. We became the engine driving Velocity's entire client pipeline. 6 months later, I stood in front of Monologics' boardroom, presenting final results. Phase 1 implementation has reduced compute overhead by 9%, I said. Latency dropped 24%. Uptime is now your new normal. Sarah smiled. This is what we were promised. And then some. As the meeting wrapped, she lingered. I've never seen a vendor turn things around this fast. I smiled. We stopped being just a vendor the second you called me back into that room. That night, I got home in time for my daughter's soccer game. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't working late. Wasn't buried in someone else's project. Wasn't invisible. They wanted to cut me out. I rebuilt the table and took the head seat. The real win wasn't the contract. It was finally getting to work like I mattered. Because now, I do.